I mean, these are people protesting
No.
because they can't eat, they can't live. Inflation is running riot. They can't get on the internet. You're on the internet now. They can't do that. Why shouldn't they?
Well, excuse me, but I'm at a studio. I do not have internet. You know this. You know this, so don't be dishonest. You've been dishonest more than once already. And if we have economic problems, it's because your government and the US government have imposed sanctions on ordinary people. You are trying to strangle ordinary people. No, I'm talking. Excuse me.
No, the West is responding.
You think you're watching a simple interview about protests in Iran, but within seconds it turns into something much bigger. A Western news host claims thousands of peaceful protesters are being slaughtered, painting a country on the edge. It sounds familiar, almost scripted. But then Seyed Mohammad Marandi does something unexpected. He refuses to agree, and everything starts to unravel. Here's what no one is telling you. The moment Marandi pushes back, the conversation shifts from facts to credibility. The host names victims like Sultani, Amir Ali Hadari, and Navidiv Salai, building an emotional case. But Marandi questions the sources, and suddenly you're stuck between two completely different realities. And this is where it gets intense. The host brings in Friedrich Merz to reinforce the idea that the government is collapsing. Marandi flips it, pointing to Western history and intervention. Then names like Donald Trump and Mike Pompeo enter the conversation, shifting the focus to sanctions, foreign pressure, and possible interference. Now watch this. What started as protests suddenly escalates to a much bigger question. What happens if war breaks out? Marandi says Iran will strike back hard. Then even Steve Bannon is referenced, blurring the lines between media, politics, and reality.
In their thousands, who are now being systematically slaughtered in their thousands, they are saying that your government no longer has the right to govern.
Yesterday, we saw rallies across the country, and the footage is online, and it was broadcast live, even though now people like Musk and others are trying to pretend it was AI.
No, these were people who were forced to go out and protest, but people of their own free will bravely went out, and in return, the government, your government, has slaughtered them in their thousands. And for what?
There were 2.3 million people in Tehran yesterday on the streets, and reporters from Al Jazeera English, Arabic, RT, CGTN, CCTV, and others, Al Mayadeen, were there, and they witnessed it. How can you force millions of people on the streets in Tehran
because you instill
and other
fear
streets?
into the people of your country. Your government instills fear into the people of your country.
I think that you are living in an alternative universe and you're drowning in your own fake narratives. If you think that the people of Iran support the MEK terror organization or the monarchists that your governments fund and support, I think you really know literally nothing about Iran.
Your government says that 2,000 people are dead. Are you denying that?
Our government never made any statements about any death numbers at all. You're talking
it's been
about
reported
Reuters.
to Reuters.
Our government does not report to Reuters, and Reuters constantly fabricates information about Iran, and it constantly says unnamed sources.
So the bodies piling up on the streets, that's all AI, that's all fake, is it?
There are no bodies piling up on the streets.
No bodies piling up on the streets. We've seen them with our own eyes.
No, not on the streets. I live in Tehran.
Well, in the morgues,
and by the way, so then rephrase and don't produce propaganda. You're supposed to be a credible news outlet. 100 police officers, roughly, or officers of the law were murdered. 2 were burnt alive. 1 was beheaded. And we had a nurse burnt alive in a clinic. The clinic was burnt down and she was burnt. She was a young nurse. We had a 3-year-old kid who was shot by these rioters, or people who you call protesters, and murdered in her father's arms. These are violent people.
Let me ask you, 26-year-old Irfan Sultani, 17-year-old Amir Ali Hadari, 28-year-old Navid Salehi, these people have all been killed for the simple fact that they are demanding freedom and they're using their voices to demand freedom. That's the truth, isn't it?
I don't know the names that you give, and I don't know what happened to these people. I don't know if they exist or not. Just giving names doesn't mean anything.
Well, they're three among thousands, and the executions begin tomorrow. And for what? For people wanting to use their voices to demand freedoms that you take for granted.
No. The people who will be executed, if they are convicted, are the people who burned people alive and who beheaded others. We had 100 police officers murdered, or officers of the law. And if one officer in the United States, it is deemed that the car in front of him may not be turning to the right enough, he can shoot the woman in the head, and people in the United States defend his right to kill her.
You're talking about 100 police officers. Murdered. I'm talking about thousands of protesters who were protesting peacefully, and for their pains, they have been slaughtered by the government, by your government. I mean, these are people protesting because they can't eat, they can't live. Inflation is running riot. They can't get on the internet. You're on the internet now. They can't do that. Why shouldn't they?
Well, excuse me, but I'm at a studio. I do not have internet. You know this. You know this, so don't be dishonest. You've been dishonest more than once already. And if we have economic problems, it's because your government and the US government have imposed sanctions on ordinary people. You are trying to strangle ordinary people. No, I'm talking. Excuse me.
No, the West is responding to the calls from the protesters who are risking their lives to go out on the street.
No,
that is why Donald Trump promised to offer help.
Well, you're aligned to Trump, obviously, now. But these are people who were rioting, and these were people who were shooting at police officers, and there's footage of it. And that footage is online. And it's on the accounts of many people, and people can see it. Mainstream media in the West, and obviously your media, since you are trying to create an environment for war and to justify illegal activity on behalf of your regime and the Trump regime, you're of course creating a narrative of thousands of peaceful protesters on the streets being slaughtered.
If you don't like my questions, Professor Marandi, let me put to you what the German Chancellor said. Friedrich Merz said, when a regime can only maintain power through violence, then it is effectively at its end. Do you accept your government is nearing its end? It's in the final days.
First of all, who said that I'm afraid of your questions or I don't like your questions? Second of all, who makes the German Chancellor any more credible than you? The German Chancellor also said when the Israeli regime, the genocidal Israeli regime, bombed Iran, while Iran was negotiating with the United States, he said, the Israelis do our dirty work for us. And this is the same German regime that gave Saddam Hussein chemical weapons to use against us.
Well,
I survived two of those chemical attacks.
The German Chancellor has been elected by his people. And you accused me of propaganda when many would accuse your government of propaganda day in, day out. So I just ask you again, is your government entering its final days?
I have no doubt that any strike on Iran, which is illegal, and obviously you're trying to promote it and to justify it, is illegal, and the Iranian people who've come to the streets yesterday to protest against the Western and Israeli-backed riot. We all know that Pompeo, who was the former head of the CIA, said that Mossad is on the ground with the rioters. We all know that Mossad gave a Persian language statement saying that its people are on the ground in Iran. And when Iran cut off the internet, and I don't have internet either, on Friday night, after Friday, suddenly the riots collapsed. Why? Because it was they were not spontaneous. They were guided and organized from abroad. And when the internet went out, suddenly they went blind. And that's why
the protesters have been given succor from abroad because they think they have help coming. So I want to ask you, if the US attacks Iran, does Iran hit US targets in the Middle East?
No, those protesters that you were talking about, they left the scene on day 1 and 2. During the first couple of days when there were protesters, about the fall in the Iranian rial, which was carried out by the United States, and this is all a part of a broader plan. Those protesters, on the first couple of days, there was no violence, there were no arrests, there were no police, there was no police involvement.
If the US attacks Iran, does Iran strike US targets in the Middle East?
So after, as I was saying, day two, when the violent rioters entered and they started destroying ambulances and public buses and banks and clinics and destroying fire engines, that's when the protesters stepped aside and it became riot. And you call those protesters peaceful protesters who murdered 100 police officers and many, many other innocent people.
Can you answer my question about if the US attacks Iran, how does Iran respond? Will it hit US targets in the Middle East?
If the United States attacks Iran, without a doubt, Iran will strike back very hard. And remember what happened during the 12-day war. Go look at the footage from Tel Aviv and other Israeli cities. And as Steve Bannon himself said the day after the war, the real story of the 12-day war was that the Israeli regime during the last 2-3 days was hit so hard that they were seeking a ceasefire, not Iran.
Well, I mean, that's propaganda in your book, as you describe it.
Go and look at Steve Bannon's interview. It was broadcast online. It's not mine.
Okay, just finally, Ayatollah Khamenei, he's an old man. It's been widely reported that he may be looking to go into exile. Would you see that as a defeat?
Well, you're just making stuff up. He's not going anywhere, and your government and the U.S. government, if they get involved in a war with Iran, global economy will go downhill and collapse. And your people will come after you and say, why did you do this to us?
Professor Mohammad.
So what are you actually watching? A debate about protests? Or a battle over who controls the narrative? Because the real question is, are you being informed or influenced?